Welcome in to This is Baseball. I'm Brandon Johnson. Let's go. So it is August 1st. The trade deadline is now after 6 p.m. Eastern. So we are officially past the deadline. And now it is time to react to the moves that happened around baseball over the last hours and few days. I want to open up the show with the Los Angeles Angels. So last week I spoke on how I felt about what the Angels should do with Shohei Ohtani. They have arguably a player that could be the greatest player to ever play the game on their team. They are 4.5 games out of their division. They are 3 games out of the wild card spot. And you have a player in Shohei Ohtani that could theoretically get you the biggest haul in the history of this sport. The Angels came out on Wednesday and said, nope, we are not trading Shohei Ohtani. In fact, we're buyers at this deadline. And I would imagine that they were getting flooded with inquiries about what's it going to take to get Shohei Ohtani. And I'm having trouble with the idea of keeping Shohei. I get it, because if you have a talent like that and you are as close as you are to being in the playoffs, it's not crazy to go for it. But, this is year 4 of Ohtani and the Angels, and they've yet to make the playoffs with him on their team. And, history will tell me that they're not going to make the postseason. So I think that the Angels have missed an opportunity. They missed an opportunity to get a decent, great package in return for Shohei Ohtani. So instead, what they did was they brought in a pitcher in Lucas Giolito. They brought in Randall Grichuk and CJ Cron from the Rockies, and they have depleted their already pretty weak farm system. And now you're in a scenario, if you're the Angels, where you only have 2 outcomes where this is a win. The first one is re-signing Shohei Ohtani in the offseason, and maybe they feel like they can. I think it would be crazy for them to not even be in the conversation. Or you win the World Series. And at this point, you pretty much have to win the World Series, because you're not going to have anything to play for after this is all said and done. For the Angels to make the postseason, they would need to, A, win their division. That would be overtaking Texas and Houston. I don't think that both of those teams are going to fall off. In fact, it's probably going to come down to the last game, because there's a half-game difference between Texas and Houston for the AL West lead. So that leaves them with another option of claiming that last wild card spot, that 6th playoff spot. They're kind of bunched up with all of the American League East teams. Toronto currently has it. Boston's right there, in New York. And, fortunately for the Angels, all 3 of those teams are playing iffy baseball at this point. So maybe there's an opening. Maybe there's a path to the playoffs through other teams falling short. Now, the Angels aren't going to have it easy. They're finishing up a series against the the Braves. They already took one game. They have two more against them. Obviously, the Braves are not an easy task. But if you take 2 out of 3 against them, hey, you're going into a series against Seattle, another team that's, right in the mix of that playoff spot that are going to be important games to win. You go into Seattle, you lose 3 out of 4. Hey, that's not a good look, because now Seattle's ahead of you, and who knows what those other teams that I mentioned in the AL East are going to do this weekend. I want to stay in the American League West and kind of knock out the New York Mets real quick. So the New York Mets, a team that has the highest payroll in the league at about $344 million this year. And the next closest team are the New York Yankees at $278 million. The Mets are, a team that, they paid a lot of money, obviously, for a roster to go out there and perform and do well and take the National League East. And this season has not gone well for them. It's gone so poorly that they are sellers at the deadline. They are moving players like Max Scherzer to the Texas Rangers to allow the Rangers to bolster their rotation. Houston also made a trade with the Mets and brought back a familiar face in Justin Verlander. And I think that the Rangers and Astros playoff push is going to be the most entertaining to watch. I still feel right now the Rangers are on top, but I still feel like the Astros are going to squeak out and take the AL West. Obviously, they're both playoff teams unless something insane happens. On the Mets front, they have pretty much said, we're punting on 2024. We might be ready to compete in 25, but we're likely going to be a force to be reckoned with in 2026. So, a team that has a very expensive roster is needing to reevaluate and have just a real quick, short rebuild. And that's exactly what they did. They got a ton of prospects in the deals that they made throughout the league today and over the last few days. The Baltimore Orioles were also in contention for starting pitching, and they made a deal today with the Cardinals and got Jack Flaherty. Jack Flaherty is going to bolster Baltimore's starting rotation and hopefully be a big piece of the playoff push that they're making. Now, he wasn't the only Cardinal to get dealt today. The Cardinals were in full sell mode during the trade deadline. Pretty much anybody that wasn't named Nolan Arenado or Paul Goldschmidt were up for grabs. They moved their closer Jordan Hicks and infielder Paul DeJong to the Toronto Blue Jays. They traded Jordan Montgomery to the Rangers. This is a team that, had expectations to win this season and just never seemed to get it going. And a team that, again, just kind of a surprise seller, found themselves in an unfamiliar position at the trade deadline. It seemed like the White Sox were going to move on from everybody. Obviously, they traded Lucas Giolito, but they also had offers for Dylan Cease and Tim Anderson, and the trade deadline came and went, and both of those players are still on the team. This is a team that I feel like has wasted a pretty good playoff window. Just never seemed to really be able to put it together. They had a lot of things happen between 2018 and now that just, things were never in the White Sox favor. So I would imagine that a player like Dylan Cease and Tim Anderson could be moved during the offseason. Now, it would be irresponsible of me to be a Royals fan and not talk about the trade deadline for the Kansas City Royals. Now, over the weekend, the Royals completed their first sweep and first 3-game winning streak of 2023. Yes, I'm aware that it is August and they didn't do that until the end of July. If that kind of puts into perspective how poorly this season has gone for Kansas City, there's that. They are now 32-75, and the possibility of them winning 40 games looks a lot better than it did before the weekend. In doing so, they helped kind of close the gap for Cleveland in the Central. The 53-54 Cleveland Guardians are only 1 game back. So there you go. But Royals couldn't possibly have anything good happen this season. Pretty much shortly after the game was done, news came out that the Royals had traded utility player Nicky Lopez to the Braves for pitcher Taylor Hearn. And on the surface, you're like, oh, Royals are making a trade with the Braves. The Braves have a pretty good organization. You're excited about getting a player from the Braves in return. Kind of confused why you traded Nicky Lopez, but sure. And then you start to look a little bit deeper at it, and you're like, oh, the Braves just got Taylor Hearn 6 days ago, and they optioned him to AAA. That's kind of weird. And then you keep looking, and Taylor Hearn on July 19th was designated for assignment by the Rangers. And on July 24th, the Braves traded for Hearn in exchange for cash. I can't begin to express how stupid this looks for Kansas City to trade Nicky Lopez or any player for somebody that they could have traded for cash a week ago. They could have called the Rangers and said, hey, we'll take Taylor Hearn off your hands. But instead, they waited until the Braves had him and ended up trading more than they probably needed to for Taylor Hearn. A player that is older than Nicky Lopez, is a completely below average pitcher. Not that Nicky Lopez is, really has any value himself. He's just a glove off the bench. But it doesn't make a ton of sense. It's a huge oversight, in my opinion, for the Royals to do something like this. And it was probably one of the easiest phone calls that general manager of the Braves, Alex Anthopoulos, made. Probably didn't need to seek any sort of counsel to make that move. Probably took all of 30 seconds. I'm sorry, you want Taylor Hearn? You want to just give us Nicky Lopez for Taylor Hearn? Yeah, we could use a glove off the bench for our playoff run. Sure. You can have this guy that we just sent down that we really didn't want in the first place. It's just silly. And I know that the Royals were likely going to non-tender Nicky Lopez in the offseason, and that's fine. But they really probably should have just gone that route in this situation rather than looking completely silly to the entire league. And I think if you're the Royals, obviously, like I said, not a lot has gone right. But when you're a small market team, like the Royals are, and you can't compete in free agency, you're not going to be in the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes or in the sweepstakes for any top free agent this offseason. You've said that. We can't compete with that in free agency. We have to build our team at the draft, and we have to make the right trades. Well, I think this is a scenario where you didn't really make the right trade. You traded for likely a 4A pitcher. Now, maybe he turns it around in Kansas City, and we're all laughing about this later, and we're talking about how great Taylor Hearn is for the Royals. But at this point in time, you just look goofy. And I'm starting to wonder if JJ Picollo really has what it takes to be a general manager in Major League Baseball. Because I keep getting told, oh, well, he's different from Dayton Moore. Him and Dayton Moore are two different people. And, well, that's true. But the reality of it is he has spent a ton of time with Dayton Moore and was part of a lot of the decisions or non-decisions that were made along the way when Dayton Moore was in charge. Now, I'll give JJ Picollo his props. He has been significantly more transactional than Dayton Moore really ever was. And maybe this is him compensating for moves that Dayton Moore didn't make. As we all remember, in 2017 when Dayton Moore had the championship core, Eric Hosmer, Lorenzo Cain, Mike Moustakas, and he opted to not deal any of them at the deadline, and he just basically let them all walk in free agency. And I think we got some compensatory picks for Hosmer and Cain's signing, but Nicky Lopez is not any of those players mentioned, and the only market you had for him was getting fleeced and played by the Atlanta Braves. And now you just look goofy. I'm happy for Nicky Lopez, though. Pretty average player. He had that one season where he filled in for Adalberto Mondesi, hit 300, had a great glove. But now he's on a team. Now he's on a team that is likely going to win a World Series. So go get your ring. Good for you. In other Royals news, Royals traded Scott Barlow, closer Scott Barlow, to San Diego Padres. They also traded Ryan Yarbrough to the Los Angeles Dodgers. So, outside of silly moves, they moved on from a couple pieces that had value in the trade market. And not to mention trading Jose Cuas to the Chicago Cubs. So they made moves, and we'll obviously have to see how these moves pan out. Not next year. Not this year. So, but that Nicky Lopez trade just kind of drove me nuts because it didn't make sense. It did not make any sense to me. But nothing has made sense in Kansas City this season. That's the trade deadline. Now begins the real push for October. Let's do a thing and look at the postseason. If the season ended today, your division winners would be the Minnesota Twins in the Central, Baltimore in the American League East, Texas in the American League West, and your three AL wildcard teams are Tampa Bay, Houston, and Toronto. If you go to the National League, your West leader, the Dodgers, Central, Cincinnati Reds, and East, the Atlanta Braves, with your NL wild card being pretty interesting, actually, because San Francisco and Philadelphia both have one, but it's a three-way tie for that last spot with Arizona, Miami, and Milwaukee. So buckle up. It's going to be very interesting and pretty fun. Now, I want to kind of change gears and share some news about something new I'll be doing. So this fall, every Tuesday, a friend of mine and myself will be hosting the Football Kingdom podcast. This is going to be a show that's going to cover the NFL as a whole. We're going to react to games, stories, news, highlights, give our opinions, and just have a good time talking about a game that we love. It's going to have a similar vibe to This Is Baseball. It just with a co-host. And I recently got together and had a conversation with my co-host. His name is Tyler Moulin, and we just talked a little bit about baseball. And I figured it would be a good thing to share and get you warmed up for the Football Kingdom podcast. I will leave a link for the show in the episode description for This Is Baseball. If you want to listen, our first episode is already out. It is a breakdown of the AFC and everything you're going to need to know to get prepared for the season. Our second episode will be doing the same thing, but with the NFC. So here's my conversation with my co-host of Football Kingdom podcast, Tyler Moulin. Tyler, how are you doing? Thank you so much for coming on This Is Baseball. Super excited to do the Football Kingdom podcast. Since I got you here, I wanted to talk a little bit of baseball with you. I know you and I will be talking plenty of football in the coming weeks, but I want to talk some baseball. We're both from Kansas City and, have a background of Royals fandom. Both grew up loving the Royals. But I kind of wanted to hear about, how you came to like baseball, and I'd just love to hear your journey of following the Royals and baseball in general.
Yeah, well, happy to be here. Long-time listener. It's love your show, by the way. Just to put it out there. I've already told you that in person, but listen to every episode and excited to hear what you had to say about all the trade deadline. I know you covered the most important trade, which is the Dodgers reacquiring Joe Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely talked about that, right?
I didn't, but that's okay.
It's a shame.
Yeah.
Your fans wanted to hear it.
Joe Kelly. We'll talk about it right now. We gotcha.
Okay, let's go.
So, Joe Kelly, Dodger legend.
There you go.
He
really is.
The ultimate pout face.
Yes.
Walking off of the mound after being ejected was arguably one of the greatest moments in sports history. So yeah, my bad. Complete oversight on that.
I saw that on Twitter and I'm like, oh yeah, because I've had kind of a love for the Dodgers way back in the day. It was the Red Sox. But that again goes into Royals fandom and kind of Kansas City fandom. I'm kind of skipping way ahead here, but the fact that the Royals win the World Series in '85 and then proceed to not make the playoffs for 29 straight years. That's a different level. And at that time, up until 2014, they had the record of like any sports, major league sports franchise. It was 29-year drought, which was just brutal. And I think there's other teams that are pretty close right now to probably already surpassing that, I think. But yeah, that's kind of what it has been like to be a Kansas City fan. Like the Chiefs kind of been there in and out, like, hey, we'll make some playoffs, but you're never really believing like they're going to go all the way. The Royals didn't even give us that, but hey, you love baseball, you love the Royals. And honestly, it started with my mom, being a single parent, being raised by my mother. I'll always love her for that, like getting her son, into sports and baseball. She's the first person that taught me how to, throw a ball. She gave me my one and only baseball glove that I still have. Um, it was actually a softball glove. So at the time, it's a really long, it's got a really long kind of basket. And when I would be in center field, I'd be like have my hands on both my knees, and the glove was like so long it would like cover my entire shin. This is literally a softball glove, and nobody ever called me on it because like I'd be in center field catching everything with this gigantic softball glove, and I used it all through, little league and t-ball and all that stuff. But uh, yeah, I think the last time I played, I was oh, probably 12 or 13, and just, I mean, geez, we could probably do a whole podcast on Little League Baseball and the positions you and I played. I'd actually like to cover that quite a bit because you were a pitcher, and that was never my strength. Center field was my absolute favorite. Played some catcher for 1 or 2 innings, and I absolutely hated it. Um, I think we played a third and fourth place game. That's like the most successful team I was ever on. But yeah, past that, it's, baseball movies are the best of any sport. And that's also what I wanted to come on here and say, to be like, hey, if you ever do a baseball movie podcast, like have me on. I got a lot to say. If we ever do like a top 5 or 10.
We'll have plenty of time to do something
Sure.
like that in the off season.
There you go.
And there's, when it's December 15th and there's,
There
winter
you go, yeah.
winter meetings are done. There's nothing to talk about. We can absolutely talk some baseball movies because I 100% agree with you.
Yes.
They're the best out of sports movies.
It's unfortunate too, because football should translate to that. They've got some pretty solid ones, but baseball, America's game, America's pastime. It just has a different feel, and I have like 5 running through my head right now. But anyway, but yeah, that's really where it started. Just with my mom, raising me as a single parent, and her really showing me a love of baseball from literally, playing catch with me, teaching me how to throw and hit. And she was like a really good softball player herself. And yeah, watching Field of Dreams like 1,000 times with her. And but yeah, where did it start for you?
Yeah. I've loved baseball, I think, probably my entire life. I know my parents obviously got me into it. My dad, they bought me a little glove, little red and blue, like probably Rawlings glove that I still have somewhere. And then I, loved Royals baseball, went to quite a few games, spent a lot of time at, opening days and, during the early 2000s into the late 2000s, and watched a lot of bad baseballs. I will say, hot take, unpopular opinion, that the Royals black uniforms are one of the best that have ever been made, and I wish they would bring it back. But
that was in the middle of my fandom.
Yeah.
Those 90s and late 2000s teams.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Yeah, those black.
I don't want to step on your
black tops, those black jerseys.
Yeah, and the dark
I loved
blue
them with the blue lettering. Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Those were great.
Those are the days of Mike Sweeney.
Mike Sweeney, yeah.
Mike Sweeney was my guy. I know Alex Gordon was your guy.
Yeah. Big Alex
and
Gordon fan here.
Yeah, he's everyone's guy, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Mike Sweeney was my dude back then.
My first favorite player was probably John Buck, because it's probably my first year playing baseball. A friend of mine his family took me to a game, and it was like third row back from the dugout, and this was before nets were a thing, and
oh yeah,
John Buck was standing there, and I had a little hat. I still have that somewhere, but we're like, hey, John Buck, can we have your autograph? And, he signs it, gives it back, gives us a little like nod and smile. And I'm like, it's my favorite player right there, John Buck. Shout out John Buck, catcher. uh, but yeah, so got into Little League. My first year playing, I think I got one hit. So
Two.
yeah, and it was against the best pitcher in our league. So
Nice.
there's something to be proud of there.
How old were you?
I had to be 7 or 8. My first
Okay.
year, I didn't play T-ball. I didn't play machine pitch. My first year playing, I played just kid pitch. And
Right.
my second year was when I really came into my own. I was I think I have a plaque somewhere. I don't really know how accurate the stats are, but I hit like 800. Pitched combined, was part of a combined no-hitter, went undefeated in our league, won a tournament, maybe 2. I think it might have been just 1, but played a little bit, didn't really take it too seriously. Got into high school and got cut in high school, which is cool. But yeah, I played, I don't know, 8 years total, and I loved it. Wish I would have taken it a little more seriously.
Right.
But yeah, and then for the Royals, again, I went to a ton of opening days and just a lot of random games, back in the day when you could sit in the high V section for $5.
$5.
And my dad in 2012, spring training 2012, took me and him just went out by ourselves to Arizona, caught some spring training games. We saw the Royals Angels. I was one of the first people to get to see Albert Pujols in an Angels jersey. Saw Royals A's the next day, Rockies and somebody else. I don't remember. But if you get a chance to go to spring training, whether it's Arizona or Florida, you definitely should, because it's an amazing time. And it was honestly the perfect time for us to go there, because it was, right when the Royals championship core was kind of blossoming. It was, I think Hosmer and Moose were up already, but you had Lorenzo Cain was playing center field, and didn't really know much about Lorenzo Cain at the time, but I remember me and my dad just watching him, and we were like, that guy is gonna be insane. And he ended up being arguably the best player during that run.
Right.
In 2015, he was top 3 in MVP voting, and that's pretty unheard of out of a player in Kansas City. So, yeah. And then Royals made the playoffs in 2014. I was able to go to the American League wild card and game with my dad and kind of be part of that roller coaster ride. Saw, the Salvador Perez, walk off down third base line under Josh Donaldson's glove. One of the greatest games and moments in sports history. Yeah.
Fair ball.
Yeah.
And the Royals win it.
Yep. And then the same season, Royals, they won the wild card game, and they had to play the 98 win 1-seed Angels, and they swept the Angels. I went to game 3 of the ALDS. And,
wow. I never knew that.
Greg Holland struck out Mike Trout to advance the Royals to the ALCS to again sweep the Orioles. There you go.
Right.
And then obviously, Madison Bumgarner crushed our dreams, and it was just insane.
6 games, right?
We lost in 7. Yeah, we lost in 7. So because you remember the thing with that game 7 was Alex Gordon. Alex Gordon should Mike Jershely have sent him or not?
Yep.
That is the age-old question in Kansas City.
Right.
And unfortunately, Salvador Perez popped up to Pablo Sandoval
Oh,
and
yes.
ended that. But then Royals came back the next year and won 95 games, won the AL Central, clinched it. I was at the game that they clinched. It was against the Seattle Mariners. Then went to game one, went to game one of the ALDS with my mom, my wife, and my brother-in-law. And Royals, that's so fuzzy to me because there was a huge rain delay. I know they lost that. I think they lost that game.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. It's
But
against the Astros.
yeah, it was against the Astros. That was the series that Carlos Correa had the error.
Yep.
And
Up the middle.
Up the middle, yep. And then I was able to go. My dad and I went to game one of the World Series against the Mets. And, we were able to see Alcides Escobar hit an inside the park home run to lead off the game.
Oh,
and
yes.
then Alex Gordon hitting that bomb, the game tying bomb to straightaway center field in the ninth inning against.
Right after Hosmer had let it go between his legs or whatever. On the right.
Yeah, right after the blunder by Hosmer. Yep. That's right. Yep.
He saved his life, basically.
Yep. And that, I hope if Alex Gordon gets a statue, I hope that it's him pointing his finger up and rounding first, because
it's gotta be.
That's one of the greatest moments,
right,
that I was able to see. And that game ended up going 14 innings, and Texas Rangers general manager Chris Young got the win in that game. And that guy's doing work.
World. Yeah, dude. Yeah, he is.
But yeah, let's enough about me. Let's talk about your Royals days.
I mean, I was right there with all of that, except all from home. Couldn't afford those type of playoff tickets, but yeah, bro, watched all that. I can still see Pablo Sandoval catching that final out, and him celebrating. I think he kind of falls on his back or something.
Yeah.
And I just turned the TV off because me and Christy, we were at home watching, and it was there, and I'm like, oh man, and I didn't have anything. I'm not a blow up guy anyway, but I turned it off, and I was like, all right, let's go to bed. Like, it was just so defeating to be like, man, they were right there, and then they just redeemed themselves by going back to back, but then winning in 15. And yeah, bro. But no, I mean, we used to skip school back in, I mean, geez, it would have been like 2000 to 2003-ish. I graduated in 2003, and we used to skip school, buy the $5 Hy-Vee tickets, the nosebleeds, but then sit in down third base line, at like 1:00 games or whatever, afternoon games, and just nobody would say anything because it was the left field side, it was the away side, and you'd sit down there. There'd be nobody there. Every now and again, somebody would be like, "What's your ticket?" But rarely. You just get to sit down there. Sometimes, we
sit in the 200s, and they won't even bother you. That's what I hear. Just I never do anything wrong like that, but
not implicating you in any way. But a friend of mine, Chris, we used to go. He actually really kind of revitalized my fandom back then, and him and I we would consume so much baseball. We would sit there and watch, and this is really love of the game type stuff. And like he would, it was like seeing it through somebody else's eyes, to be like, he just loved the sound of like a fastball, like popping into a mitt, a 90-mile-an-hour just pop. He's like, I love that sound. And he would sit there and like call strikes, balls and strikes and stuff, like waiting for him to like strike the dude out. And he's like, no, that's not a third strike, and, kind of vicariously through him, it really kind of revitalized my fandom. And yeah, we just went to so many games back then because, again, they were super cheap, super bad teams, but great players, Johnny Damon and, God, who was their, Aaron Guile.
Aaron Kyle.
That
Wow.
guy,
Okay.
just these random dudes who like nobody knows who the heck these guys are except, KC fans, but those types of teams where you're like, man, this is the best we got, but you still love them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I think the Royals the Royals really do, for how bad they are, they really do have a pretty loyal fan base to have people that can recite rosters or lineups from like the 2005 and 6 teams, just abysmal season they had, and
Right.
to see it all kind of come to fruition, and it all pay off, and they win a championship in 2015. I think if a fan base deserved that, it was Kansas City, and
For sure.
hopefully hopefully they can figure out what's going on with themselves right now and get going in the right direction. We don't really have to get too far into that, but
Yeah, I was gonna say, you definitely bring me on whenever we get closer to a stadium decision, and yeah, definitely want to look at the rest of this season because my goodness, they traded so many people today. It's kind of insane. I mean, did they trade like 6 players, the Royals?
I think total they traded 6 players, not necessarily all today,
Oh,
but
well, yeah.
just throughout the season. Yeah. And
Yeah, because there's like 4 pitchers or something that happened today or something.
Oh yeah. Yep. Most, I think outside of Nicky Lopez, it was all pitchers that they traded.
Right.
But yeah, so that is Tyler Moulin, and like I said, every Tuesday we are doing a show called the Football Kingdom Podcast, and we're again just going to discuss the NFL. We're going to discuss games, what's going on, last week, what's going to happen next week, and just have a good time. And these are going to be available wherever you get your podcasts. So again, yeah, thank you, Tyler, for coming on and hanging out. And he's my co-host of the Football Kingdom podcast, and I will link the first episode of this show into this episode description. But
Nice.
I'm Brandon Johnson. This is baseball. Thank you for listening.